Thank you for this opportunity. In the next 3 or 4 minutes, I'm going to provide a brief overview of some experimental work that we've been involved in on quantifying the pre, co, and post-seismic evolution of elastic wave properties for laboratory earthquakes. I have links to the published works at the end of this short presentation if you're interested in learning more about details of our work. This lab-scale study was motivated by many recent observations of wave speed and attenuation variations in natural faults at different stages in the seismic cycle. For example, top left, Fenglin New and others documented this short-term precursor reduction in P-wave velocities from an active seismic survey near Safewad. This study, top right, is one example of co-seismic reduction and a subsequent post-seismic relaxation or slow increase in velocities determined from ambient noise right around the 2003 San Simeon and the 2004 Parkfield earthquakes. Bottom right is a recent attenuation study which found long-term pre-seismic variations in wave attenuation, again prior to the 2003 San Simeon earthquake, during which period there was no corresponding velocity variations in the ambient noise. Finally, Claudia Churaba and others recently performed a time-lapse tomography to show a 25-day-long precursory velocity reduction near the Norcia earthquake hypocenter, which was absent in a relatively far-field location. In the lab, we're trying to see if we can recreate these observations and determine what causes them. The lab quakes I'm going to discuss were generated in the Penn State rock deformation apparatus, which is this machine on the left. It's a dual-axis servo-controlled hydraulic press with fault normal stress applied on the horizontal axis and a constant shear displacement rate imposed on the vertical axis. The sample itself is composed of 3 blocks of granite sandwiched together to form 2 faults. We introduced a thin dusting of fine quartz gouge to simulate the wear experienced by the faults, and then shear the longer central block to generate these earthquakes. I also want to point out that mechanically, these experiments are very well instrumented. We have displacement sensors and load cells in the horizontal and vertical axes to measure the far field and the near field mechanical response. Finally, as we shear the fault, we also continuously shoot and receive ultrasonic pulses throughout the fault at a very high frequency and estimate the transmission coefficient and velocity of the P-wave package. I'm showing here a snapshot of multiple seismic cycles from our experiment on the left for a given seismic cycle. We have a co-seismic drop in the amplitude and the velocities, a post-seismic recovery, and a pre-seismic anomaly. The interesting thing is that the amplitude precursor onsets far earlier in time than the velocity precursor, which appears just before failure. Physically, if the amplitude and the velocities are linked, this doesn't make much sense. To better understand what's going on, we decided to partition the effect of the wall rock and the fault zone on these ultrasonic or elastic wave signatures. And details are in this paper here. But what we found was that the onset of the amplitude reduction coincides really well with the onset of pre-slip in our stick-slip experiments. And this relationship barely changes even when we partition and remove the role of this intraseismic shear stress increase in the wall rock, which is the pink curve here. When we analyze the velocities, remember that the composite velocity through the 3 shear blocks in the 2 faults has a very short-term anomaly close to failure in black. The interesting thing is that when we partition out the role of the stress increase in the wall rock, our velocities look very similar to the amplitude response. In other words, the short-term velocity changes we observe must be due to a competition between the increasing velocities due to stress increase in the wall rock and a decreasing velocity due to pre-slip of the fault. The next question is, can we resolve these signatures in nature? On the left, again, I'm showing you the plot of P-wave velocity variations from Claudia Charaba's seismic tomography. And they observe a precursory velocity reduction prior to the earthquake near the hypocenter in red, but did not see any such precursors in the more northern location in blue. In this case, they hypothesized that the local precursor was likely due to pre-seismic creep, and the lack of precursor further away to the north was probably because of overprinting from the schistine accumulation or tectonic stiffening, which is exactly what we've documented in our significantly smaller scale experimental setup on the right, that the creep-based precursors, even when they exist, can be easily missed due to overprinting from schist stiffening of the wall rock, particularly more so for the velocity precursor. So this gives us some confidence that we can see these seismic anomalies in nature, potentially through repeat time-lapse surveys in the near field of locked patches, which focus not only on velocities, but also on the amplitude or attenuation profile. Thank you.